The number of Brumbies roaming free in Australia's red centre is growing by about 20% every year. That means there's a risk that nature won't keep producing enough food to feed all of them. At the same time, though, there are questions over the horses' sustainability. They're becoming a draw card for tourists from around the country and overseas. Regional reporter Leonie Miller has the story.
Fly over this country in helicopters and see individual bands of horses moving across the country is an experience that, for me, it takes me back to the evolution of the horse, the way it was millions of years ago.
Kings Creek Station is a working cattle and camel property about 300 kilometres southwest of Alice Springs. Among the canyons wild horses run, thousands of them, the desert Brumbies of Central Australia. Some are descendants of animals owned by the early explorers. Others turned loose as stockmen were replaced by machinery.
What we don't recognise is the survival capabilities, what extremes of temperature, exertion, endurance and athletic ability that they really have, because this environment tests them to their limits.
Professor Chris Pollitt has been studying these feral horses for more than a decade.
The conundrum is we love the horse. We love to see it in its wild state, its fully evolved state, and thriving in its natural environment. We love to see that. But we know this is Australia and it's not their natural environment, so we have to make some compromises.
3 years ago, authorities culled several thousand feral horses in a bid to reduce their numbers. Now, Professor Pollitt is turning them into a draw card.
So welcome to Brumbies.
Sharing his fascination for the wild desert horses.
The Brumbie is the toughest horse in the world. They're not meant to live in deserts. There's no natural desert horses. They just don't exist.
Horse-loving adventurers have come from interstate and overseas. It's a not-for-profit venture.
We love seeing free-roaming horses, and we just like to talk to colleagues and people who are very passionate about horses and hooves.
You're okay, little horses. You're okay.
They've come to see this, wild horses in what's referred to as bands. Groups of up to a dozen with a protective stallion guarding the mares and foals. And to learn the science behind how they've survived.
Once the band is established, all of the mares are loyal to that stallion, and that stallion is loyal to all of the mares. And it's a really special thing to see.
Some have tracking collars to monitor their movements.
We need this research because we will one day hope to be able to define how much territory bands of horses need to survive without destroying their territory.
The group takes to the dusty red tracks to search for wild horses, grazing among what's left of the mulga trees. For many, they symbolise the romance and adventure of the Australian outback. For others, a lifelong dream to break in a Brumbie.
They come out here, they learn to break in their horse, and they take their horse home, and they might form a 20-year partnership back home with that horse. He's pretty sensitive, he's moving well.
Brian Hampson is a renowned horsebreaker. He's selected a handful of Brumbies to train from the thousands roaming wild.
My body language is different. The first few days, you're just trying to convince them that you're not out to hurt them. By the end of the third day, you really get a close relationship with them, and the last couple of days, you're their leader.
Penny Richards from Orange in New South Wales says she felt an emotional bond with her new horse straight away.
I couldn't think of ever re-releasing her. I couldn't think of her having to go back to being hungry and being thirsty and having to have foal after foal after foal.
Even the renowned horsebreaker admits that domestication is not the long-term answer to the booming Brumbie population.
I love having Brumbies out here. There's just too many of them. What the horses do is trample the ground, they cause erosion, they eat every bit of grass in that valley by the end of the long winter time, and it just changes the ecology of the valley forever.
Wildlife ecologist David Berman first studied the Brumbies more than 30 years ago. He's seen how the landscape has changed.
As a horse lover, we don't want to see anything starve to death, and that's what happens. I've walked around waterholes with, 80 carcasses of horses that have died in the drought, and the waterhole is just full of bones from horses.
They agree the horse population has to be managed. The question is how. Sterilisation is deemed impractical because of the vast area. Setting up special reserves an option. Culling or aerial shooting is effective, but controversial.
They will come to realise that populations have to be managed, that culling, nasty as it is a definite option that we have to embrace and consider.
Culling's not the only answer. You need all these options, and you need to judge which option's used in the different situation.
Ian Conway is the owner and manager of the 180,000 hectare Kings Creek station.
It's not unusual to actually sight anything up to 400 or 500 horses in one day.
He says the Brumbies are important to traditional owners.
Aboriginal people don't like to see animals destroyed for no reason. When the cull was on, they really didn't want them shot, and they discovered horses dead everywhere, and they were very upset about it.
Mr Conway says he'd prefer the feral horses be shipped to slaughterhouses for meat as an enterprise for Indigenous people rather than shot and left to waste.
Whatever we do, we've got to put the welfare of the horse in a number one prime position.
There are no easy answers. Around the drovers' campfire, the harsh realities of the day are soothed by the star-studded cool desert air. Bush poetry recited as it was in days gone by.
There was movement at the station, for the word had passed around. The cult from old regret had got away.
And the Brumbies, some broken, off to a new life with new owners.
There they go.
The remainder to continue the legacy and the legend of the Desert Brumbie.